Hello, and welcome to the Poison Paint Factory. My factory designated name is Poison 226. Nice to meet you. Shh, quiet. There's something rustling in the bushes over there. You know in your heart who it is, and you know what? This time, it's not Shia LaBeouf. In the moonlight, shadows dance in unsettling ways. What was that? Of all days to go skinny dipping at Camp Crystallake. What made you decide on Friday the 13th? The water's cold and the air is tinged with fog. It's eerie quiet. You must have heard the campfire story about Jason Voorhees. You know, the little boy who drowned here, right? They say it was due to camp counselors' lackadaisical supervision. Well, I heard that his mother went mad and went on a killing spree. No, seriously. No one is quite sure what the final body count was, but some say she's still out there on nights like this, quietly biding her time. What if Mrs. Voorhees' baby boy died? I mean, really died and never came back? What if she was never caught and became the prolific killer instead of Jason? Today, I want to talk about Friday the 13th franchise and the Voorhees family. So we're heading to Camp Crystallake for this video, but we need to set some guidelines here. No spitting, no cussing, no drinking, no fighting. Mrs. Voorhees don't like it. And we don't want to upset Mrs. Voorhees, do we? In this video, we're going to go over the Friday the 13th franchise in summary. We'll hit a few bits of obscure media, and finally we'll discuss the original Friday the 13th in more detail, and ask the question, what would the franchise have been like if Jason stayed dead and we had a female slasher at the helm? Oh, and while you're here, why don't you try and figure out how this video is connected to the last franchise I talked about? What has Spawn and Friday the 13th got in common? Maybe it's an actor or writer. Maybe it's an artist or, well, it could be almost anything. Let me tell you what your best guess is in the comments, and I'll let you know if you're right. So, my first experience with Friday the 13th was at someone's 12th birthday party. We were allowed to choose one movie to rent from Blockbuster.
Little nostalgia.
As a bunch of pubescent boys, the choice was obvious. The X stands for 10.
Wink, wink.
This was probably my first proper horror experience, and what a first experience it was. I know it's not really a good movie, but try and look it through the eyes of a sensitive, young boy, and you'll understand. It shaped my taste in movies for better or worse, and is still a movie I hold near and dear to my heart. Outside of nostalgia, it really is a fun time. You can trust me. Honest. Disclaimer, a lot of the information presented in this video is public information that I researched alongside my interpretation and opinions. Sources will be linked in the description, and yes, there will be spoilers. So, with all that said, let's get to it and take the plunge. Who is Jason Voorhees? Jason looks like this, or any shade of these. As you can see, he's changed quite a bit over the years. But if you want to talk about classic Jason, he wears a hockey mask, is generally found wielding a massive machete, and is anywhere between 5'11" and 6'5" tall. If I'm being completely honest, everything else is secondary. Born Jason Voorhees on 13th June 1946 to Elias and Pamela Voorhees. He was afflicted with several physical and mental disabilities, one of which being hydrocephalus. This causes the sufferer's head to grow abnormally large. Because of this, his mother kept him isolated and educated him from home. This had a massive impact on young Jason, making him incredibly obedient to his mother's requests and taking on her conservative ideologies. In the summer of 1957, Pamela Voorhees accepted a job as cook at Camp Crystallake. Now a single mother, and with no one else to look after him, Jason was brought in tow, attached at the hip as always. It wasn't long before the other kids started bullying him, which concluded with Jason being thrown in the lake where he drowned. As Jason struggled, he cried for his mother. He cried for anyone to help. This only fell on deaf ears. The camp counsellors, who were meant to look after the children, were otherwise engaged.
Well, you're very saucy.
Which Mrs. Voorhees didn't take too kindly to. Police combed Crystal Lake, but Jason's body was never recovered. Obviously, Jason made his first on-screen appearance at the end of the first film, but it was a far cry from what people think of when they think of Jason or the Friday-13th franchise. As time goes on, Jason becomes the unstoppable killing machine people grew to know and love. He is the personification of fear, of death. He is the great white shark, and nowhere is safe. Silent, stalking, lethal. He has no need to run where his prey is concerned, as he is a master hunter who knows Crystal Lake like the back of his hand. If you are a teenager doing anything morally questionable, you will feel his wrath. This is probably because he is hearing the voice of his mother compelling him to kill, teach the kids a lesson, just like his mother did all those years ago. Being witness to your own mother's beheading might do that to a guy. Throughout the franchise, Jason has shown that he has superhuman strength, is incredibly resilient to both damage and pain, and has sublime understanding of guerrilla tactics and his surroundings. He has died and suffered lethal wounds in practically every film, but through one way or another, he either struggles on through the pain or has come back to life entirely, ready to take revenge and kill again. From part 6, Jason Lives. He actually comes back from the dead, so he's now undead, immortal, and can regenerate, but each film does show this slightly differently. He is proficient with most hand weapons, but seems to be particularly fond of his machete, perhaps because this is the weapon that killed his mother. I don't know. I'm not going to try and psychoanalyze Jason Voorhees. Friday-13th is a film franchise mainly focused around serial killer Jason Voorhees, and is usually located at the fictitious Camp Crystal Lake. The first film was released on Friday-13th in May 1980. No wait, let me just check. 9th of May? What? They really missed a trick here. It was the 130th day of the year, and it did fall on a Friday, so I guess there's a link there, but let's just check. Curiously, only 5 of the 12 films came out on a Friday the 13th. Actually, let's just check in with the marketing meetings quickly. Yeah, that figures. Of the 12 films released, the naming convention isn't fixed, so some are just numbered and some have a subtitle. Speaking of naming conventions, there are 2 with final in the subtitle, 2 with new, and 2 movies that are just simply called Friday-13th, that being the 1980s original and the other being the 2009 reboot. Jason isn't the killer in the first Friday-13th movie. It was his mother, Pamela Voorhees, portrayed by Betsy Palmer. She believed that her son Jason had drowned due to the negligence of previous camp counselors, and believed that he was telling her to get revenge from beyond the grave. After killing the 2 counselors she believed were responsible, the camp was closed. Upon the camp being reopened, she attempts to kill the new camp counselors out of fear of another incident. You know, like the one that befell her son. Pamela is beheaded with her own machete, and the film ends with one final jump scare. It was directed by Sean Cunningham, who was also producer for the original Friday-13th, Jason Goes to Hell, Freddy vs. Jason, and the 2009 reboot. He was also credited as executive producer for Jason X. A year after the first film, and with a new director at the helm, Friday-13th Part 2 was released. Why was there a new director at the helm? Well, Sean Cunningham thought it was a bad idea. He didn't want to do a film based on Jason, because the ending wasn't meant to be taken seriously, and the Friday-13th series was meant to be an anthology of movies, and not just one story or recurring character. I think of his vision being more like telling campfire stories. As for the story of Part 2, Alice, the sole survivor from the last film, takes an ice pick to the head by an unknown assailant. Camp's open for business again, with a whole new batch of victims. Counsellors. The camp is due to open for business the next day, so a bunch of the counsellors go to the town to celebrate and leave 6 behind to look after the camp. On returning, they find their friends dead, and are then attacked themselves by a man in a burlap sack on his head. Finding a shack in the woods, one of them finds Jason's altar to his mother. Knowing that Jason is their assailant, she dresses as his mother to trick him into allowing them to escape. It works enough to get the jump on him, sticking him with a machete. Surprise! He's not dead. An unmasked Jason now jumps through the window. She then wakes up in an ambulance. Her friend is missing, and Jason is nowhere to be seen. Part 2 was directed by Steve Miner, who was associate producer on the first movie. He also directed Part 3. Released in 3D,
which was the style at the time,
and released 2 years after Part 2, but set directly after the last film, Jason is back and is out to ruin another troop of teenagers' fun. He kills. He gets a new wardrobe and his iconic hockey mask. Shop owners, a bike gang, and the kids. Isn't anyone safe from Jason in 3D? Jason does take some punishment, including, but not limited to, being stabbed, being hit with a log, being hit with a shovel, being hanged, and taking an axe to the skull. Jason is seemingly dead, with his murderer, Chris, recouping in a canoe in the lake. Safe. Nope, Mrs. Voorhees is back, baby! Mrs. V drags Chris into the water. Fake out. It was all a dream. Jason is still inert with an axe in his melon. Chris is taken away by police and has survived the ordeal, with almost none of her mental faculties intact. The third film was intended to be the final part in the trilogy, but Jason, being true to form, refused to die, and so we have Final Chapter was not the final chapter. Once again, Jason looked death in the face and survived. Well, kind of. As Friday-13th Part 4, the final chapter, was meant to be the final film in the series, again, this was welcomed by director Joseph Zito, original makeup designer Tom Savini, and Paramount Pictures, who were producing and distributing the film. Ted White portrays Jason in the final chapter, but is uncredited. This was supposedly because he constantly butted heads with the director about how he was mistreating the actors. As for the actual plot, set the next day after events of Part 3, poor Jason, he was having a bad week. The crime scene is being dealt with, Jason's corpse is being taken away, but he's not dead. Shock. Horror. And starts his kill streak as if death was a minor inconvenience. We're introduced to this movie's future victims, some kids who are renting a house near Crystallake. We also get to meet Tommy and his sister Trish, who live next door to the rental house. Everyone gets killed off one by one, as you would expect from a Friday-13th movie. By the end of the film, only Tommy and Trish are left. Tommy shaves his head to make him look like Jason, distracting him long enough for Trish to swing at Jason with his machete. Dropping it, Tommy picks it up and finishes the job. The nightmare is finally over. Or is it? So A New Hope, A New Beginning, didn't even have Jason as the killer, making this the second film in the series to not have Jason as the main antagonist, or hero, depending on your point of view. This film was meant to be the start of a new trilogy of movies starring someone other than Jason as the villain, but alas, this wasn't meant to be. Tommy is back and in a halfway house for troubled teens. We are introduced to several of the other inmates, and then the accidents start happening. Eventually, the name Jason is bandied about, but Jason died 5 years ago, right? Tommy is having hallucinations of Jason until it turns out he's not. It really is Jason. Jason actually falls to his death, revealing that this Jason was actually a copycat killer. It ends with a does he, doesn't he, with Tommy wearing the copycat killer's mask. In this film, Jason is brought back from the dead and awakened the zombie-esque supernatural side of the franchise. This was due to such negativity to the previous film, and it seems to not take itself so seriously anymore. It definitely feels like this was the new tone the series was going to take in future. Jason Lives is the second most popular film of the series with critics, with the first film being the most popular. Also to be noted, Jason Lives retcons the events of A New Beginning and brought about a new continuity, making the final chapter ironically have 2 direct sequels, when it initially was meant to be the end of the series. Jason Lives is the only film to not contain any nudity, so there you go.
Classy.
So, the plot. A year after the last film, Jason is still dead and buried until Tommy decides to dig him up to cremate his remains. Before they have a chance to do the deed, Tommy starts stabbing Jason's body with a steel fence post. Lightning strikes, and Jason is Frankenstein's monstered back to life. Jason is leaving a trail of bodies as he returns home, while Tommy tries to warn everyone he comes into contact with about Jason's undeath. Megan and Tommy fight Jason, chaining him to a boulder and sinking him into the lake. It still takes a boat propeller to the head, and even then, Jason is only incapacitated, trapped at the bottom of the lake. Jason fights a psychic girl. What? You need me to elaborate? Fine. 10 years ago, after his burial by water, a group of teenagers are on holiday at Camp Crystal Lake, and a psychic girl, Tina, is being experimented on. She accidentally frees Jason from his watery grave, to which Jason does what he does best.
I'm the best there is at what I do, but what I do isn't very nice.
After many, many deaths, Tina uses her powers on Jason, dropping a porch roof on him, which only slows him down and makes him angry. And you won't like him when he's angry. She then sets him on fire. The house explodes, and Tina's newly resurrected dad wraps Jason in chains and dumps him back in the lake. Sure, okay, why not? This film was meant to be the end of the series. Are you seeing a pattern yet? Guess what? It wasn't. Originally, Part 8 was meant to be named Jason Takes a Holiday. Not really, but you believed me for a second, didn't you? This was the first film to be set away from Camp Crystal Lake, so that's nice. Jason's on a boat! Sorry, excuse me. He's on a boat! I'm not going to say it again. So there's some kids going to New York for their graduation, but little did they know they would graduate life instead, thanks to Jason. I never said I was a comedian, sorry. Many die. Some escape on a lifeboat and head to shore, but Jason's not far behind. Now in Manhattan, the chase continues. Many get caught and killed along the way, as you would expect, leaving only 2 survivors. They go through the sewers. A flood of toxic waste catches Jason just in time, and well, he melts into a little boy. I had to rewatch the ending just to make sure I remembered correctly, and well, here. Don't ask because I have no idea. Interesting facts. The big guy in the diner that Jason throws into a mirror, he's Ken Kersinger, who plays Jason in Freddy vs. Jason. He was also meant to play Jason in this movie, but Kane Hodder asked to reprise his role. The studio weren't going to ask him, as they thought he didn't want to do it for some reason. Jason was meant to kick a dog in this film, but Kane Hodder refused to do it, saying it was out of character for Jason. Good lad. Finally, very little of this movie is set in New York, and most of the New York scenes were filmed in Vancouver. Surely this will be the final film. It was not. Jason is back at Crystallake, and somehow not the little boy we were left with at the end of the last movie. Who cares about continuity? Let's go! He tries to kill an undercover FBI agent, but is blown to pieces by a grenade. All the pieces of Jason were taken to the morgue, where Jason's heart is eaten by a coroner. The coroner is now possessed by Jason, who goes on to kill everyone. Jason has the ability now to transfer his consciousness into other bodies, as you do. And the people who are trying to stop Jason find out that only a member of the Voorhees family can kill Jason permanently. One of these family members, Jessica, is given a mystical dagger that has the ability to put Jason down for good. Jason is after Jessica. He must know about the family curse thing. His heart has now become a demonic infant and climbs inside Diana and is reborn, mask and all. Jason gets stabbed and the souls of his victims escape his body, I guess. It's hard to explain. Demons grab Jason and drag him to hell. And then a certain someone's beknived fingers burst through the ground to retrieve Jason's hockey mask, setting up the sequel. Nah, just kidding. It will be a while before fans would get that movie. Honestly, suspend your disbelief for this movie. I'm pretty sure everyone else involved in the production did. But how can you top something as guano as this? Especially since your main character is in hell. Well, you send them to...
space!
We've seen it all now, so what can they do to surprise us next? In the distant future of 2008, Jason has been captured and held by the US government at a research facility at Crystallake, because of course they are. How is he back from hell? Who knows? Just sit down and watch the film, Timmy. They can't kill him, so they had the brilliant idea of putting him in cryogenic suspension. He obviously escapes, kills everyone, chases a female scientist into the cryo-freezing room, and they both get frozen. Fast forward to 2455, and they are found by some students on a field trip. They take both the stiffs back to the spaceship and defrost them. Jason goes on a rampage, killing everyone. Scientist, student, heavily armoured security, military? We'll call them Marines of the space variety, which are legally distinct. The pilot is killed and the ship crashes through a space station, causing a lot of damage to the ship.
Now that's a lot of damage!
Their only option is to get on an escape pod before they are killed by Jason or go down with the ship. One panicked crew member launches the shuttle without disconnecting the fuel line, and it explodes, trapping the remaining survivors on an exploding ship with Jason. An android named KM-14 takes out Jason with ease and knocks him onto a medical station. Wait for it. They put out a distress call and manage to get a response. All they have to do is hold out until they're rescued. But Jason's back! He's now Uber Jason. Not that kind of Uber. Half Jason, half cyborg, Uber Jason. Get it? Got it? Good. Distracted by a holographic simulation of Crystallake, the survivors escape. Uber Jason is sucked out into space. Back on Earth too, a shooting star flies over a beautiful lake, and Jason's mask is shown slowly sinking to the bottom of the lake. Freddy Krueger is trapped in hell and has been forgotten by the kids of Elm Street. He's getting weak and needs to come up with a way of getting back into their nightmares. He needs a special kind of help. Jason is now free of hell and is on a killing spree on Elm Street as Freddy, pretending to be Jason's mother, tells him to rise again and kill for Mommy. Because Freddy will get credited as the killer, he will regain his powers and be able to come back. Yay! It started off so well for him as the kids were talking about Freddy again and they were starting to get scared. But before Freddy is strong enough, Jason beats him to the punch. Freddy is getting more and more frustrated that Jason will not stop and his powers will leave him, as it will be Jason the kids fear and not him, therefore trapping him back in hell. Poor Freddy. The teens decide that if they can bring Freddy into the real world, he will be weak, and if they can get Jason back to Crystal Lake, he will leave them alone. So actually, it goes quite well at first. Jason is tranquilized and put in the back of a van, and while asleep confronts Freddy in the dream world. Jason is winning until Freddy figures out Jason is afraid of water. This fear changes Jason from a monster in a hockey mask into a little boy who drowned. While vulnerable, Freddy tries to drown him for a second time, but Jason is woken up before he can die in his dream and starts attacking the teenagers. Freddy is brought into the real world, which distracts Jason from killing the kids. The icons clash. As the fight continues, they both sustain wicked injuries. The survivors blow up the cabin Jason and Freddy are fighting in, which sends the monsters into the lake. They survive the explosion and continue to pursue the survivors. Jason seemingly kills Freddy, but falls into the lake. One of the survivors, Laurie, beheads Freddy with Jason's machete, and that's the end of that. Well, the next morning, Jason rises from the lake, carrying Freddy's severed head, which winks and laughs, showing that evil never dies, and neither side has truly won. Fun trivia, Rey Mysterio was in the film but is uncredited, and Rob Zombie was asked to direct this movie but turned it down to work on his own film, House of a Thousand Corpses. This is a reboot of the series. It incorporates the original 3 movies, but more of a reference than a shot-for-shot remake. In 1980, Jason sees his mother get beheaded. 30 years later, some teenagers are doing what they do at Crystal Lake. They are all killed except for one, Whitney, who he locks up in his underground cave because she looks like his mother. Later, some more teenagers come to Crystal Lake to party, and we meet Clay. He's Whitney's brother, and he is looking for her. Jason starts killing off the kids as he does. Eventually they realise the danger they're in. Cops come but get killed. Clay and one of the girls escape Jason and run into the woods. They stumble across Jason's cabin, that is. See what I did there? And find Whitney, who they free. Jason chases them down, but only Clay and Whitney escape alive due to Whitney confusing Jason by acting like his mother and stabbing him with his machete. They dump his body into the lake. He bursts through the wooden dock and drags Whitney into the water. I think it's a pretty good modern interpretation of the franchise, ditching a lot of the sillier elements and staying true to what the franchise was to start with. I wonder what they would have done had they carried on with this modern continuity, but at this point we can only dream, as this new rebooted continuity seems to be dead on arrival. The TV series was Friday-13th in name only, and did not have anything to do with the Friday-13th movies. It centred on collecting cursed items for an antique shop, in a vague cursed curio of the week way. It was supposed to have a certain iconic hockey mask as the final item, but this was never shot, as the show was cancelled unceremoniously due to pressures from religious groups at the time. It was the era of the Satanic Panic, so yeah, we didn't get a proper conclusion to the series because of the
Won't somebody please think of the children?
police. It ran from 1987 to 1990, had 72 episodes and 3 seasons. People who watched it at the time were upset that they had been tricked into watching something called Friday-13th without Jason showing up. But funnily enough, this was how Friday-13th was envisioned from the beginning, remember? A collection of campfire stories, but that was scrapped when the original Friday-13th did so well at the box office, and they decided to focus on the Voorhees family instead. Throughout the franchise, many people have worn the mask, although not all of them literally. These people all portrayed Jason at one time or another. Sadly, not all of them were officially credited. Friday13th has been highly influential on many other forms of media. There are plenty of other videos that explore the world of Jason-inspired games in more depth, so we'll keep this brief here. Obviously I have to start with the band First Jason, fronted by literally the first Jason, Ari Lehman, who portrayed young Jason in the original Friday 13th. With songs titled Kill for Mother, Jason is Watching and Lord of the Lake, what more do you want from a Friday 13th inspired metal band? Following on, here's a band full of Jasons called The Jasons. They're a horror punk band who wear Jason outfits. Each member is a different Jason from a different movie. Some of their Friday 13th related songs are Don't Send Me Into Outer Space, We're Going to Manhattan, and Crazy Ralph, Shut Your Mouth. A highlight for me is a song called I Wanna Be an Asshole, which is a response to Amazinger's song I Don't Want to Be an Asshole Anymore. The Amazingers music video centers on Jason, who stopped killing people and is looking to turn his life around. Obviously the Jasons must have taken umbrage to this character assassination and wanted to clap back. As for how they sound, I'd say the Jasons sound more the Ramones than the Misfits, if that helps. Speaking of the Misfits, no, not that one. Or that one. Yeah, that's the one. The Jerry Only era had a crack at Jason with their 2016 Friday 13th EP. Another missed opportunity here. This was released on the 17th of June, not Friday 13th. Alice Cooper did a song called He's Back, The Man Behind the Mask, for Jason Lives, which was covered by Lordi, One Man Army, and plenty of others. Just look up the song on Spotify or YouTube and you'll see what I mean. Quick mention to Teenage Frankenstein and Hard Rock Summer, which were also written by Alice to be featured on Part 6 soundtrack. Camp Crystal Lake by blood-sucking zombies from outer space is a wicked psychobilly take on Friday 13th. Till Death Do Us Party by Wednesday 13 is an absolute horror punk anthem. Probably one of the more recent songs released about Friday 13th, Ice Nine Kills did a song called Thank God It's Friday. It's metalcore. It's exactly what you want from a modern Friday 13th song. The music video is well produced and shot if you have 10 minutes to spare a look. If metalcore is too heavy for you, check out Wolfie's Just Fine, a new beginning which fits more with the folk or indie scene. Instead of singing about being Jason or Jason's gonna get ya, he sings more about being a kid, too young to fully understand the movie he's watching and that first horror experience. Anyone into synthwave or dark synth? The Midnight featuring Nikki Flores did a song simply called Jason. Another synthwave artist, Clusterbuster, did a song called Welcome to Camp Crystal Lake and has several albums with art that's reminiscent of the Friday movie posters. Switching genres again, late 80s rap song Ain't No Half Steppin' by Big Daddy Kane has a passing mention of Jason and Friday 13th. It is just a couple of bars, not the whole song, but I know if I didn't mention it here, someone would tell me I've missed it. Rounding off the music part of this video, I thought it might be worth adding an honourable mention to Weird Al Yankovic's Nature Trail to Hell, as it embodies the themes of 80 slashers movies more than being a direct reference, and I'll probably never be able to mention it in another video, so there you go I guess. I know there will be others that I've missed, minor references or more underground bands, but this is at least a good place to start if you're into songs about fictitious serial killers. Feel free to add any you find in the comments, so I can add them to my playlist. Jason is seen at the end of this film attacking the only survivor. He is a young boy with a deformed head, not the hockey mask wearing, machete wielding zombie man we all know and love today. Originally, Jason was envisioned by Victor Miller as a normal looking boy. It was Tom Savini who was credited with the deformed look Jason ended up with, and the rest is history. The original Friday 13th had a budget of $550,000 and made 10 times that in its opening week. It supposedly grossed between $39.5 million and almost $60 million worldwide, depending on where you get your information. This low risk to reward would influence them to bring out 9 movies, 3 seasons of a TV show, and 2 video games in 13 years. You may not know, but Jason was never meant to be the murderer. Victor Miller was not happy that subsequent films made him the killer, saying, Jason was dead from the very beginning. He was a victim, not a villain. Like the film Jaws that had been hugely popular a few years prior, the film has scenes shot through the killer's point of view. Team this up with the simple and repetitive music used to accent the killer, you can see where some of their inspiration came from. The music is a shortened version of the quote, "Kill her mommy," this being for kill and for mommy. So, let's pretend that this is another timeline. Mrs. Voorhees was not decapitated, that all camp counselors perished, and that Jason did not survive his drowning. What we know about Mrs. V is that she was violent and vengeful, that she had her own sense of morals, which did not allow for drink, drugs, or premarital sex. She probably wouldn't have worn a hockey mask. With this information, I personally believe if she had gotten away with murder, she may have changed her occupation from camp cook to school counsellor. In my head, she would have used this kindly old woman, or motherly figure, to lure out the bad apples, get to know their hopes and fears, and then she could have played on them to deadly effect. I see her more as a psychological killer, using personal themes to kill her victims like Freddy did, but without the supernatural element. She would make her victims feel how Jason would have felt being tormented and scared until she decides to end their lives. In contrast, if backed into a corner, I could see her turning wild, feral, and then you would see another side of her, that visceral hatred painted on the crime scenes. This could cause confusion for the detectives who are looking for the Crystal Lake killer. maybe making them think that there are several murderers working together. We've covered a lot in this video, way more than the average camp counselor if you know what I mean. We've talked movies, TV shows and random other niche media. We've dissected Jason and the people who portrayed him. We've done a bit of a deep dive into the first movie. We've even had time to throw together a what-if scenario with Mrs. V. And so, with all that said, thank you for your time. I wish you a good day, and many more besides. Yours, forever in horror, 226.